So, do you see your move? Do you see how you can win this thing? Because you can't. You see, I have what's known as the Radcliffe Gambit. And that's where I set up the board without your king, and I already won the game. The Queen's Gambit launched on Netflix in October and has already been responsible for what's called the Netflix effect. 250% increase in searches for chess sets on eBay. Searches for how to play chess on Google are at a 9-year high. And chess players on chess.com, registered chess players, have multiplied by 5 since this show launched. Because The Queen's Gambit is an excellent show, and it pitches the wonder, the marvel, the beauty of mastery of a craft, of mastery of a game, chess in this case obviously, but it could apply anywhere. Watching that show, seeing the pieces move, seeing the strategy analyzed, how can I do this, how can I get this there, how can I improve upon what I am doing, how can I deliver a better, more strategic experience, how can I outplay that person. There's an appeal to this, and it's certainly an appeal that board games have to me to a degree. At the same time, mastery is not something I actually want to see in board games. Mastery has its place, and it is beautiful to behold, whether it's somebody working on how to build the next spaceship, or whether it's someone just banging that nail into the wall with one shot. Mastery is cool. It's wonderful. It's fascinating to see it, to recognize. Have you ever watched these YouTube videos of people peeling melons in one slice, of bagging 14 things of groceries? It doesn't matter what the task at hand is. Seeing someone good at something, there's an element of appreciation at play, and that's why I do love The Queen's Gambit, and I highly recommend watching that show. But as far as its place in board games, I just don't think mastery is the core of what I'm looking for in games. You see, mastery in games is ultimately a barrier to the accessibility and the fun that two people can have. To me, games and gaming in general have always been about the concept of bringing people together. Whether it's a family member sitting across the table from them, whether it's having your kids at the table, whether it's game night with your friends, or whether it's hopping on Yukata or wherever it is and playing a game with someone you've never met. That concept of being around the table together, virtual or physical, it brings people together. You know what doesn't bring people together? Hopping on BoardGameArena.com and showing up for a game of Race for the Galaxy and having your cards handed to you on a plate while someone destroys you. That's mastery to a degree, but it's not really a contest when people of unequal skill levels play a game. That's not something that's marvelous to behold, and mastery inherently adds this aspect to gaming that prevents people from being able to play a game together. Now again, don't get me wrong, it certainly has its place. It's certainly the idea that I can sit there and play Race for the Galaxy with someone else and we'll both be playing on somewhat equal footing, versus the idea that two expert Race for the Galaxy players may head off against each other and have a significantly tighter, more strategic match. That certainly has an appeal. But if you're particularly amazing at Race for the Galaxy and I'm not, that's not going to bring us together. That's not going to introduce the fun of gaming to each other. That's just going to introduce the concept of what it's like to lose painfully, quickly, and without mercy. And I just don't appreciate that in gaming. And this concept of simple to learn, a lifetime to master. I like simple to learn, but a lifetime to master hints at that aspect of mastery, which again is not something I appreciate. There are exceptions to be sure. Splatter games have their own place on my shelf, and yet someone who's never played a splatter game versus someone who has played a splatter game, you're playing on two very different playing fields. And so the question is, how can we have the best of both worlds? Because a game without mastery, at a certain point, if we can just introduce the game, hey, let's just roll a die and see who wins. Games with no strategy inherently have the least barrier to two different people of two different skill levels. Playing war with each other doesn't matter if you've been playing it for 30 years or if I've been playing it for the first time. We are on equal footing. Strategy is something to look for in games. The concept of wanting strategy in your board games is laudable. One of the things I've said in general, I want two things to make a game fun. I want two concepts that will ultimately be why I keep a game or not. The first is this game fun? And it's a bit of an abstract, archaic concept, but it's something that I do look for. And the second is, did I make meaningful decisions in that game? And it doesn't matter if it's a party game. I don't care if I'm playing Monikers or if I'm playing Innis or Brask Birmingham or who knows what. If I'm not making strategic decisions in a game, I'll just watch a movie or read a book. I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of going through a sequence of moves that are predetermined, and so I clearly want strategy in my game. The more strategy, the better. I like that concept of multiple elements at play and how to see the puzzle within. Playing a game of Vindication, playing a game of Brass Birmingham, Food Chain Magnet, Blood Rage, playing those games, being introduced to the elements at play, the mechanics of the game, and seeing how you can find and forge a pathway through those games to ultimately win. That's why I play games. So how can I have it all? How can I both seek strategy, seek that aspect of the gap between what you see and what I see, and learning to win off that, while also having a problem with mastery, which I think introduces that barrier? And I think the first answer is going to come down to, ultimately, mastery, like I said, has its place. My goal isn't to reduce strategy. My goal is to minimize the gap between players as much as possible, and that can be done through a variety of different things. The first benefit we have, which even chess has, honestly, is the fact that mastery in chess doesn't come from playing chess 5-10 times a year. That's not where mastery in chess gets introduced. I could play chess with most of you, and we'll be on similar playing fields. We both played this game, we both know the core rules, we've both played it at some point here and there, and for most of you, we'll be on somewhat similar playing fields. The match will be tense, back and forth, it'll be fun. Someone will ultimately win, but we'll both have had a good time. For some of you, I'll completely destroy you. I'm just better at it than you are. You either haven't played it, you've played it 14 years ago, and that's fine, and that won't be fun for you, and we shouldn't play it together. And for others of you, you'll completely destroy me, because I think I'm good at chess. I don't think I'm great at it. I think I'm good. I mean, I can clearly set up a board with no king on it and half get away with it. And so that concept of reducing the gap between players is not the same thing as not having strategy in a board game. And the first thing, this is going to be the first of a few things I do to try to minimize that mastery gap in games while still trying to acquire and play games that have strategy. And the first thing of those is going to be the concept that I look for games that have the lowest drop-off point as possible when playing with them. What I mean by that is there are some games that you can play once versus twice, and there's a big gap there. If I've played Coimbra for the 4th time and you're playing it for the first time, there is going to be a gap there. And I'll try to minimize that gap as much as possible. I will teach you not only the rules of the game, but I will teach you all the strategies of the game as well. I will say that, oh, you know, I know that this is how you play the game, but from these starting cards, these are the very real pathways that I would be looking at to pursue. I don't specifically point at what I would do exactly. That takes the fun out of it as well. But I go through my thought process of what looks good to me, what presents the optimal puzzle of trying to figure out which of these pathways to go down. And that's an important concept in games. Teach not just the rules, but teach the strategies as well. Make people feel welcome at your table. Shut Up and Sit Down once said that if you teach a game and you've won, you've already lost. Now, I don't agree with that to that degree, but I understand and agree with the concept behind it. Certainly don't teach a game and destroy it. And certainly ensure that when you're teaching games, do not always be the person who wins. It's okay to win the first time. It's totally fine. The goal isn't to win or not win. The goal is to make other people at the table have a good time. They should feel like they actually played a game, not that they got their whatever handed to them on a plate. That's not why people play games. They play games to have fun, and winning or losing is an entirely different video in and of itself as to the merits of trying to win or whatever it is. But at least they should feel like they had a chance. At least they should feel like they were in the game. They had that concept grasped, and they were going and heading towards the win. And if they do win, good. The best thing you can do to someone new at a game is help them win that game. Give them every tool at their disposal. Give them handicaps if they're comfortable with it. Some people are, some people hate them. Some people hate the concept of getting a handicap in a game, even though it's really just leveling the playing field. It's not giving them any sort of whatever. It's leveling the playing field because I have 5 plays in my belt, you have 0. And so that's the first thing I look for in games. The concept of low drop-off in the strategy. I understand that playing a game once versus twice versus 3 times, there's going to be a big gap in how I play the game versus how you play the game, because you've merely been taught it, I've experienced it. But in my ideal world, that drop-off, it continuously gets lower and lower and lower over time. My favorite games in my collections are games that you playing it for the 3rd time versus me playing it for the 20th time, there's a minimal gap there. That extra 17 plays doesn't actually introduce a barrier to you and I enjoying it together. And that's what I look for in games. And going back to Splotter games for a minute, Splotter games have a ridiculously high drop-off from the 1st play to the 3rd play. But over time, they still get better. They actually, over time, despite that huge cliff of the 1st play, they actually do get better over multiple plays. You playing a Splotter game for the 2nd time versus me playing it for the 5th time, that drop-off is already significantly minimized. And you playing it for the 3rd time versus me playing it for the 10th time, again, it's not nearly as bad as that initial cliff that they throw and push you off of. The second thing, and this is, I guess, a common solution that most board gamers have found, is have a lot of games. If you're playing the same games again and again and again, you and your group might develop a love and appreciation for it that others cannot hope to have with their collection. I am sure that's true. Think of Twilight Imperium, that if you have a group that is playing it every single week, that's incredible. It's also going to be super hard to actually do anything with that game if one person picks up and moves and someone else wants to enter your game group. They won't be on a level playing field for quite some time. And so there is a reward to that mastery. There is a reward to doubling down on certain games in your collection and getting to the table more often and appreciating the nuance and depth of a game. But it's also going to make it harder for others to play with you. I have gotten rid of games over the years because the gap at where I was over time just didn't compare to someone else. Race for the Galaxy is a good example of that. I am far from a master at that game. And yet I eventually got rid of it because I couldn't play it with new people until they had gotten 4 or 5 plays under their belt, and people weren't willing to make that commitment, and I wasn't willing to dumb down my plays for 5 plays just to get someone in. And so that aspect, not playing games too often, while you'll lose out on some of the mastery aspects of it, you'll also get the concept that I can pull out almost every game in my collection with someone new, and they will already be on a decent playing field with me. They will already, if you assume you've played other games, and playing other games does help, having that core construct of knowing what a worker placement is, what a deck builder is, ensuring that they have a firm background in gaming, and then jumping into a new one, you're already to a certain extent on a level playing field. Also, don't get apps. This is a big one for me as well. I've gotten rid of games because of apps. Galaxy Trucker in particular is a game I got rid of because I got the app for the game, and I played it, and I dragged tiles around, and I frequently, consistently got the feel for what it's like to just move the tiles to where they need to be. And now I can't play Galaxy Trucker with anyone without basically just completely destroying them. And so over time, again, Galaxy Trucker, a game that I love, the game that is zany, it's crazy, it mixes strategy and just weird wackiness and your ship blowing apart. And yet I don't play it anymore because I got to a point where every time I pulled it out, I destroyed everyone around me, and that was just no fun for me. And so, I don't play games on apps anymore that I'm still playing in real life. I have a rule that I only get an app for a game under one of 2 situations. Either the game is gone, in which case I'm happy to get it. Once the game's gone and I'm just playing it on the app, then who cares? Alternative 2 is if I'm playing it on the app with real people. Through the Ages is a game that I have the app for, but 90% of my plays on the app are with real opponents who are playing the game, and so I don't dive down into 14 plays of Through the Ages in a single week. Rather, I slowly get my turns in with real people who are growing alongside me, and not 14 games a week either. Avoid multiple plays. Avoid overplaying solo games that you play together with other people. It's the same concept. But if you have Terraforming Mars, which I love, and I love Terraforming Mars solo as well, and you're playing it 14 times solo for every single time you play it in person, it's the exact same type of problem. You are introducing an element of mastery. You will see those patterns build faster than other people will because you've played it 14 times to their 1. And so I have the same basic concept or rule at play. I will play Terraforming Mars solo, but I try to ensure that I am playing it more in person than I am solo. That the gap, that drop-off continues to be minimal. We have 3 games in person and I play a game solo. Another 2 games in person and I play it solo. Now I don't actually track it back and forth that way, but I have the general awareness of not overplaying solo games when I'm playing them with other people. And then lastly, and this is going to be a big one as well, when you are playing games with new players, when you are introducing that first play of Blood Rage, of Cyclades, of whatever it is, to someone new, and this, ideally, is a game you love, and you're introducing them to them for the first time, winning should not be your goal. You have to have an overarching goal when you play a game, because otherwise what are you doing? And so in theory, winning is your goal. But in practice, what I tend to do in those cases is whenever I'm playing games with new people, I still try to win. You need that construct in place. But I try to win through employing new strategies that I never have before. It's hard to employ new strategies in games. When you're playing against people who are competitive players and you try something new, you might not have fun. You might have a bad game because that is the risk you take when you try something new. But when I'm playing with new players, that is when I will try out-of-the-box strategies for the game, or just strategies I've never tried before. But I will dive down a new rabbit hole of exploration of trying to figure out, you know what? I've never attempted that before. Instinctively, I go for this, that, and the other, but I'm going to try to get these cards, that place, attempt that version of area control, go for this version of drafting, or who knows what it is. I will look for areas and pathways that I have never explored in that particular game, because then I can have the best of both worlds. I get to try out new things. I get to introduce them to a new game and have them be a competitive player because they're trying the things that seem to make sense. I'm trying the things that don't. And hopefully between that balance of me playing it 4 times or 5 times, 10 times, whatever it is, hopefully that balance will work its way out, that I will still have a competitive experience while being able to experiment. And it has worked well. I have played games where I tried something new with new people and then actually had an incredibly good game, which is interesting. I guess in theory not as good for them because the whole point is to level the playing field, but I have learnt new things in games, and then I've had other times where I learnt new things not to do, and then they won the game, which is a win-win all around as far as I'm concerned. And so that basically would be my last tip as far as trying to minimize that strategic gap versus mastery or whatnot. And that's basically this video. It's just I've had this topic in my head for a while now. It's something we talked about briefly on the Quackalo podcast, the Weekly Quack. I'll link to that down below. But its basic idea of mastery in games is simultaneously laudable, but also introduces a barrier to other people playing a game with you. And that's not why I play games. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.